We have to save the marshes to save ourselves.
Climate change has disrupted water systems around the world. From intense drought to extreme flooding, our fragile ecosystems are now feeling the effects. As sea levels rise and rain patterns shift, coastal soils are becoming saltier. This salinization is a serious problem, threatening soil fertility and our global food security. Even if we do reach net zero carbon emissions in the future, we still need to learn to live with what's going on in our environment right now, especially when it comes to water. We've come to Andalusia in southern Spain to find out how salt marshes could offer a solution. On the banks of the mighty Guadalquivir River, Yanik Nyberg, founder of NARA Climate, is working on the front line of climate change. Yanik, what's the story of this region? How's it been affected by climate change?
So this region of southern Spain, like many Mediterranean regions, sitting at an estuary, is affected by rising sea levels, a lack of rainfall, the irregular weather patterns, like many other areas of the world. The estuaries are pretty interesting areas. They're extremely fertile regions. And that's typically where the best agriculture takes place. And it's always this battle between the saltwater coming upstream and the freshwater going downstream. And now you have rising sea levels creating more inflows from the sea and less rainfall upstream, creating less downward flow. And so that competition is creating this imbalance where all the agriculture in the middle that depends on that freshwater is now becoming increasingly saline.
What's the projection if climate change keeps going as it is? How will that affect agriculture here?
Well, we already know that a third of the farmland globally is threatened by salt and salinity. So if we remove a third of our food production because of this threat, it's a huge loss. That obviously is not the best situation when we need more farmland to feed a couple billion more people over the next century.
Is this something that we can learn to live with, or are we going to have to do something about it?
It's a mitigation versus adaptation situation. Yes, there's mitigation that we can do. We could improve the hydrology and make sure that saltwater doesn't penetrate into land, but it's a situation where it's kind of too little too late, and I think it's very much adaptation time. So looking at working with those conditions, working with salt, instead of trying to force it out, because that's a losing battle.
Huge networks of dikes, canals, drainage systems and irrigation pipes crisscross the land. Historically, this river delta was all salt marshes, but more than 70% has been destroyed for modern agriculture. And surprisingly, it's still happening.
So we're walking on a former salt marsh, and it was a salt marsh not that long ago, so it's been recently drained and turned into conventional farmland. And you can see how sadly degraded it is right now, and you can just tell by the gray color. It's been saturated, it's lost a lot of its nutrients. And the worst part is it's near permanent, so it's almost impossible to remove that salt in any normal ways, unless miraculously there's a freshwater flood. But in most places of the world that's already water stressed, you're just not going to see that.
What kind of crops can you grow in salty soil?
So there's two main types. There's conventional crops that have been bred for salt tolerance, so potatoes and rice, cabbage, things that we know. And then there's the natural species called halophytes.
You're going to hear this word a lot, so let's make sure we understand it. A halophyte is a salt-tolerant plant that grows in soil or waters of high salinity.
So they're naturally evolved and adapted. So that's primarily what we focus on, is using natural species as ecosystem engineers.
Harnessing the power of naturally salt-tolerant plants, NARA Climate is restoring marshland ecosystems in salt-affected regions around the world. Just downriver is the first of 3 salt marsh sites that they're working on here in Spain. Wow, here we are, and the sun's come out.
Yeah, I got lucky. It changes that fast, but this is what it normally usually feels and looks like.
And it's quite remote out here.
It is, yeah. It's there's nothing for miles, and it's a huge site. It's over 1,000 hectares and all the way to the horizon. Over here, it's a natural salt marsh, so this is what we're trying to mimic and replicate. So we're actively turning farmland, or what used to be agricultural land, but before that was a salt marsh, back into a salt marsh, but with an agricultural twist, right? So we're actively farming these ecosystems. And one of the main reasons why we do this combined, this integrated approach, is to really incentivize the restoration of landscapes. If you just go to a farmer and say, how about you just flood your land with salt water, it's a hard sell, right? If it's just an environmental biodiversity narrative. Farmers like farming, and of course the economic value of agriculture is quite high as well. So it just makes sense to harmonize those together, right? That conservation and agriculture in one activity.
The former agricultural land is re-flooded using the same infrastructure that was originally built to drain it. Once flooded, the salt-tolerant plants naturally return, and the transformation can be remarkably quick. A restored marsh site can turn green within 6 months. On the edge of the river, a remaining natural salt marsh shows how important the ecosystem is for biodiversity. And how's salt marshes beneficial for bird life? It's amazing to see all these flamingos.
Yeah, it's an active biodiversity park in many ways. Between the birds, the insects, even mammals, it's huge. It's 550 species that live in these wetlands here, just in this immediate area. There's so many different types of plants that coexist here. And what I personally love about these salt marshes is everything you see is edible. So it's kind of like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory. Everything you see and touch is you can eat. So that makes it quite interesting in terms of what you can actually do with it and how you can use these plants for different food or livestock feed or any kind of purposes. So this, like many other of the salt marshes here, is where we actively look for new plants that can survive and thrive in other places around the world. So a lot of these plants and their offspring are actually growing now in Namibia and the deserts of northern Kenya, because they're just so hardy and they can tolerate all of the extremes like drought, flooding, salinity, and generally really poor soils like here.
As well as Kenya and Namibia, NARA Climate is also restoring salt marshes in the US and UK, Ghana, Bangladesh, Pakistan and Australia. What kind of species are we looking for here?
So we prioritize, or we're looking for this resilience in these plants. So how can these survive in the harshest conditions? That's one. And then secondly is what commercial value can they bring? Thirdly, also how much carbon can they sequester? So if they hit those three objectives, that's a winner. And so in this field, there's already 4 winners that meet those criteria.
The 4 halophyte winners are Sarcocornia, sea aster, blue panicum and Batis maritima. Every month, Yanik collects plant samples to send off to a lab to test for the bioactive compounds that make these plants commercially valuable.
What we're looking for now is a specific type of plant, which you're seeing all around us, which is a perennial Salicornia. These ones are perennials, which means that we don't have to sow or till the soil or do anything every year. They just grow back. We come in, harvest, and they just grow back.
And these just grow naturally here?
These are all natural plants. This is obviously a bit more of a recent flood, so you're seeing them a bit more sparse, but over the next year, this is all going to be kind of like a carpet like we're seeing over here. But yeah, these are fascinating. The seeds are the size of a grain of sand, but then they grow to these quite large bushels, and that's really where the value is. But they're succulents, and yeah, also quite delicious. So
yeah,
they contain a lot of water and a lot of salt water. You can taste that salt when you try it. But we're using these carbon negative plants for a number of different uses, like livestock feed or fish food. It's obviously all organic, there's no pesticides or fertilizers. So it's a really good alternative to other feedstocks like soy, for example. So a lot of the things that soy can do, these plants can do. They have a higher protein content, more nutrients, bioactives.
The halophytes can produce 30 tons of biomass per hectare, compared to just 6 or 7 for soy. To get a closer look at this special plant, we also need to see the roots.
All right. So this is, I suppose this is where the magic happens. And this is one of the reasons why these plants are just incredible. They really turn degraded land into this, or soil into this super dense, basically carbon sink, and that you can commercialize through carbon credits. But above the soil is just hugely valuable in terms of agricultural output. So we have two revenue models. One is the carbon and one is the agricultural value. I think that's really what makes this ecosystem or agricultural ecosystem approach really fascinating, because you're doubling up on that value while letting one support the other and incentivize the restoration as well.
It's crucial to understand the compound profile of the plants to make sure that they're harvested at the right time and in the right quality. What else do we need to get?
So now we're just going to get the samples that are going to get shipped off to the lab. We're looking for two different plants, so they're coincidentally and easily right here.
Perfect.
We got our perennial Salicornia, we got our perennial sea blight. So we're just going to start kind of getting them. Sometimes the best way is to use shears, and that's quite an easy way. So I'm going to give you those. I'm more of a pull them right out. So
I get the easy job.
Yeah, get the easy job. Just get it really down to a couple inches, and then we can put the biomass in the basket.
Great.
Yeah,
great.
I'm just going to start snapping them off on my own here.
It's quite hard.
Yeah, it's a speed thing.
How much do we need to get? All of it?
Yeah, enough.
Good gardening skills here. And then what happens to all of this? Where does this go?
So these are just samples to inform when we go and harvest. But once we do, we're out here with mechanical equipment, harvesters that are, kind of commercial scale, industrial scale, and that kind of are baling everything together and shipping it out to the customer.
You can harvest the plants for feedstock, and animals can graze on them directly as well. At the moment, NARA is sending the halophyte crops to Scotland and Denmark. In Denmark, a team at the Aalborg University in Esbjerg has developed a biorefinery technology to extract the valuable bioactive compounds that the halophytes make. Hi Henrik, great to meet you.
Great to meet you, welcome to Esbjerg.
Thank you. Henrik Tribler is the co-founder of Halorefine. What happens to all of the plants once they arrive here?
So we put them into our biorefinery process. It's a patented process and technology. What we basically do is we fractionate the plant. By that I mean we fractionate it into different compounds. There are the primary metabolites like fibers and so on, and there are the metabolites like phytochemicals, very potent, bioactive, high-value phytochemicals. We do that by cascade extraction.
What exactly is a phytochemical and why is it so important?
They show very valuable properties in terms of health. So we have seen in studies that they are antiviral, they are antibacterial, they are anti-inflammatory, which is a condition that is connected to many diseases. Antioxidative is also, and there's also studies showing that it can work against stuff like Alzheimer's, amyloid-related diseases.
Their biorefinery tech has recently been scaled up to a large prototype, which can produce several hundred litres of extract containing the phytochemicals every day. What is this?
So this is our patent-pending extraction technology at Halorefine, and
can we look inside?
Unfortunately not. So we are taking a patent on this extraction technology. So we want to keep it a bit secretive.
Top secret. It looks a bit just like a shipping container.
That is funny you mention it, because it actually is a shipping container. So it's a 40-foot shipping container. And the neat thing about the shipping container is that we can pick it up with a crane and then we can drive it to Spain, for instance. We can place it in Andalusia next to a farm, and the farmer can use it directly from the biomass that you see that he or she is producing can be used directly into the container. It can also be shipped to Egypt, to the Middle East, to China, somewhere where you're using halophytes for cultivation.
At the moment, the container is staying put while they fine-tune the process. Can you tell us about the extraction process?
So this extraction process is a cascaded extraction where we use water as our main solvent, and we manipulate the properties of water so that we don't need to use any of these very carcinogenic, toxic, flammable, explosive organic solvents that are being used at the moment.
The carbon-neutral biorefinery can run on renewable power and reuses heat generated in the extraction process. The extract then goes into the lab. Professor Mette Thompson is co-founder of Halorefine and spin-off Haloderma. So all of those plants that we saw in the salt marsh have now been transformed. What are all these things?
So this is what it looks like when it comes to us, to the biorefinery. These are pretty much just the dried salicornia. And the first step is that we mill the biomass, we reduce the particle size so that the extraction is more efficient. Then we put it into our patented extraction process, and basically this is the result. So this is the extract with all the bioactive compounds, very rich in very, very beneficial polyphenols. This extract goes directly into our cosmetic line. We can also, for the fish feed, we dry it, stabilize it, and then it becomes this product, which is easy to extrude into the other components, the protein, the sugars that also goes into fish feed. So this is like a fish feed supplements that we know from some of the research that we've done, that this significantly enhances the immune defense, the defense of the fish against diseases.
Great, can I smell it?
Yes.
Oh, it's like a sort of vinegar mixed with caramel or something. It's kind of sweet. It's not just the extract that can be used. The leftover fibres have a range of potential applications too.
This is the sugar part. The majority of this are sugars. And this is not a waste product. These fibres can be building blocks for, in the future, for sustainable textiles, for bulk chemicals, all the chemicals we get today from the petrochemical industry. We're also looking at biofuels.
The team in Denmark is also researching ways to harness the health benefits of phytochemicals in the form of a general dietary supplement and to target specific health conditions. Their skincare and cosmetics line is already on the market.
This is our relief cream. This is the first one we developed. I was living in Abu Dhabi from 2008 to 2016, and that was actually where the first time I started working with halophytes, because Abu Dhabi is a desert and a lot of these plants grow naturally there. And we discovered these amazing polyphenols that the plants are producing to protect themselves from this very hostile environment they have to live in, because seawater is very toxic. So when the plants, they constantly have to neutralize the free radicals, the same way as when we eat junk food, fried food.
The phytochemical enhanced cream has been clinically tested and is beneficial for itchy and painful skin conditions like psoriasis and eczema. As well as the various end products, halophytes can also be appreciated just as they are. Back in Andalusia, at the centre of a restored salt marsh, in a refurbished tide mill dating back 2 centuries, 3 Michelin star restaurant Aponiente is using the marsh's flora and fauna. This is so beautiful in here.
Yeah.
Inside the mill.
This is the heart of Aponiente, the kitchen.
Everyone looks really busy.
Yeah, this is a critical hour because we are waiting for our guests.
What kind of food is everyone going to eat today? What's on the menu for today?
We start with phytoplankton and zooplankton, sea snails, oysters, a lot of halophytes, and of course all the fish and squids from the marsh that we daily fish near from here.
22 courses of high-end cooking is served using locally sourced produce, which means a low carbon footprint. The restaurant was started by Ángel León, known in Spain as the Chef del Mar, or the Chef of the Sea. He set out to change the way that people think about the ocean. Juan Martín is Aponiente's environmental manager. Why does a restaurant need an environmental manager?
Because this Aponiente is much more than a restaurant. This is a gastronomy laboratory obsessed to save our culture, our nature, and to restore the marshes and the wildlife. It's serving a meal using the humble fauna and flora from the marshes.
What kind of foods can you farm or forage from the marsh?
We are looking for proteins, cereals, vegetables, halophytes. Under the sea and on the marshes, there are a lot of food more than fish. And the Poniente message is to care with respect the marsh and the ocean in order to reduce the pressure on the fishing stocks and to open our mind to the consumption of new species that have a high value. And you can find 170 different aquatic species just in a transformed area. So it's not just hidden for the wildlife, it's amazing sea pantry and a nice win-win model for nature and for human.
In the Bay of Cadiz, there's a long history of living alongside the marshes. 3,000 years ago, the Phoenicians created salt pans to make salt. Now mostly abandoned, they are also being restored. Why is this marsh here so important?
I used to explain that the marsh is the origin of our life on Earth because million years ago the life appeared underwater, but later a lot of fauna and flora were conquering the Earth using these marshes. So there are the championship of the blue carbon sink. They are the championship for the ecological productivity. They produce oxygen. It's a nursery for hundreds of species that later we will fish, for example, in the sea. And it's also a buffer to avoid the consequence of the climate change. So we have to save the marshes, not just for conservation, ospreys, spoonbills, waders, or even seahorses. We have to save the marshes to save ourselves.
Yanik first came to Spain when he advised on Aponiente's marsh restoration work. And now Juan is involved in one of NARA's other projects on the banks of the Guadalquivir River. This is a biosphere wildlife habitat for birds, but it's also an active farm and aquaculture facility. Great views from up here.
Yeah, changes the view when you're a little bit higher up.
How big is this project?
So this one is, the first phase is 300 hectares, and once it's fully complete, in follow-on phases we're looking at 600 to 800 hectares. So it's quite a fair size. It's not the biggest, but it's still quite big considering.
Take me through the before and after. What have you done here?
So comparing it to the other site, this one is very engineered. You're seeing a lot of earthworks, you're seeing lagoons that have been dug out of the soil and of the earth, and then bringing as much of that tidal water in, creating these lagoons, and they're already starting to fill up here. And with that water comes and the seeds and the nutrients that it takes to start to restore that site naturally with that hydrology. And we're already starting to see a lot of this green is just recent growth over the last couple of weeks.
In terms of climate change, what would you say are the challenges and how is this project going to help?
So this site, I would say, is a type of blueprint, I think, for a lot of coastal climate challenges, both in terms of creating carbon sinks on degraded lands that are also functional carbon sinks, that at the same time also ticks the biodiversity box.
Nearly half of the world's estuaries have been altered by humans, and 20% of this loss has occurred in the past 35 years, making salt marsh conservation and restoration projects like these even more crucial.
Generally, we are, as a society and governments, starting to realize the importance of wetlands and starting to allow water to return to these drained marshes. They are the lungs of our planet in many ways, so protecting them and restoring them is just pretty important. But at the same time, they can also really help us produce the feedstocks that we need for what we call this green transition. So replacing harmful ingredients in industries, with carbon negative ingredients. So that's another beauty of what salt marshes can do for us.